G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with yet another clip in the SunFoil 5th prototype construction series. I've been playing with the blue spray paint. I'm not a perfect spray painter and I know that I haven't done a brilliant job, and the plan is to go and get another can of blue paint so that I can fix up things like this little area which got kind of undersprayed. Don't know whether you can see that there. I'm going to try and turn it around any more. There we go, right? So there's an area there that hasn't been quite properly covered, and I would like to sort of sand it back and see if I can't do a better job, because let's face it, it's going onto the roof of my son's car, and people do like to pick holes in things. Don't they what? Now, I was going to try and keep this a very short movie, but let's have a look at some of the figures which have so pleased a bloke in Ireland, I think he lives, called Hatomarif, which is fire moth said backwards. Now, whereas it was the fuel log and distance recordings which convinced Hatomarif, and I think the big governor and pretty much anybody else who's looked at those particular clips, it was the fuel distance log which convinced people that my figures are real, the recordings are real, the savings are genuine, so they better readjust their theory and come up with some explanation for how it is that I'm saving so much fuel. So Hatomarif asked me if I could tell him how much current was coming out of the solar regulator and how much current was coming out of the alternator, immediately after I start the engine. Well, I've got 113 pages of notes. Over a year, the first year, every day I did nothing but monitor that bloody thing on the roof of my car. So I was able to say to Hatomarif via Thumbpad last night, yeah mate, 31st of August 2010, day 11, and I'm going to try and read around the phone rather than read the phone screen, so I hope I don't get this too blurred for you. 14:38 hours, because I use military time. 4/8 cloud, fully charged, 13.28 volts, plus 0.05 of an amp. 14:40, 2 minutes later. Engine start, and the charging light comes on. 14.25 volts, plus 0.25 of an amp from the panel, or the solar regulator, plus 1.5 amps from the alternator. 14:41:30, 1.5 minutes later, fully charged. 14:45, radio on, idling at my front gate at 750 RPM. 14.32 volts, plus 0.15 of an amp from the panel, plus 0.05 of an amp from the alternator. And that pleased old mate, because he's working on the theory that my solar charge regulator is overvolting the alternator's regulator, and that's how come the car is running on sunlight in preference to petrol powered electricity. It's because the solar charge regulator is prepared to go higher than the alternator's regulator. And I think this might be because when you hit the starter motor key, there's such an enormous current drain on the battery that it sucks the voltage right down to anywhere between 10.5, which is the bottom end of normal, to maybe 12 if you've got a perfectly charged battery in perfect condition. But anyway, it sucks that voltage down to the point where the solar regulator thinks it's got to desulfate the battery. And when it's got to desulfate the battery, some of those solar regulators have got a circuit in them that'll take the thing up to 15.3 volts, maybe 15.5. So by chance and coincidence, twice in a row I happen to have picked a brand of solar regulator which is capable of outvolting my car's alternator, and my son's car, and old mate George's car. In fact, we've tried 7 combinations of regulators, alternators and step-up ratios in 3 different cars, and it's worked every time. But if you're going to do this, you might want to talk to an auto electrician and make sure that your alternator is not going to outvolt your solar regulator. Alright? It all depends on the regulators fighting with each other. So, after Hertomariff and I had got to that level of understanding, he then said, well, can you tell me how many times did you start the engine the previous day? Because he's onto the idea that it's the history of operation that determines what the battery does today. And I've discovered that if you insult your battery today, it might still be not quite finished forgiving you 6 weeks down the track. Right? Batteries get the shits really quick, and they take a long time to decide they're forgiven you. So let's see what happened the previous day, will we? Take sheet 5 and put it away again. Alright. 30th of the 8th, day 10. 7/8 cloud in the morning. Right? 4 degrees Celsius. 0715, 13.89 volts, plus 0.03 of an amp. Right? 0730, fully charged. Pretty good after a night sitting there sucking on with the dashboard sucking on the battery, and it was only a little 45 amp battery back in those days. 10:19, fully charged. 10:19:30, startup, charging light comes on. 10:20:30, or 1 minute after startup, fully charged. 10:37, engine off, fully charged. That was engine start number 1, 17.5 minutes to town. 10:50. The fully charged light's on, start the engine, the charging light comes on. 10:51, 0.30 seconds, switch the engine off, it's fully charged. Startup number 2, that was 1.5 minutes. 11.08, radio on, 6/8 cloud, charging. 11:11:30, start the engine, charging. 11:12:30, fully charged. 11:13, switch the engine off. That was startup number 3, 1.5 minutes. See, it's a small town. 11:17, fully charged, start the engine, charging light comes on. 11:17:30, fully charged, half a minute. 11:19, switch off. It says it's charging, and then 15 seconds later it's fully charged. That was engine start number 4, 2 minutes 15 seconds. 11:30, startup, charging light comes on. 11:30, 30 seconds, fully charged. Right? Half a minute. 11:34, switch off, fully charged light is on. Engine start number 5, 4 minutes that was. 12:39, fully charged, started up, charging light comes on. 12:41:30, it's switched off and it's charging. That was startup number 6, 2.5 minutes. 12:24, fully charged, start the engine, charging light comes on. 12:24, 45 seconds, fully charged light comes on. 12:27, switch off, fully charged. Engine start number 7, 3 minutes. 12:42:30, it's fully charged. 12:43, start the engine. The charge light comes on. 12:43, it's fully charged and it's charging, right? We've got both lights indicating. 12:57, 14.22 volts, plus 0.23 of an amp from the solar panel, plus 0.05 of an amp from the alternator. The fully charged light is brightly lit, the charging light is dimly lit. 1 o'clock and 45 seconds, fully charged. Switch the engine off and the radio on, and the charging light comes on. That was engine start number 8, and we ran the motor for 18 minutes. I've obviously come from home back to my place, from town back to my place. 1 o'clock and 4 minutes, radio on, plus 0.45 of an amp from the solar panel, minus 0.46 of an amp from the radio on the dashboard. Voltage 13.18 volts. It's a fully charged battery, 13.2 is fully charged. 13.05 minutes, radio off. The charging light is on. it's 6/8 cloud and the car's under the shade of a tree. 1 minute later, 13:06, fully charged. So during that day I was able to tell the Tomariff 8 startups, 50 minutes 30-second total run time, 30 k's to and from town, 9.5 k's driving in town, 1.583 k's running around in the four-wheel drive country, 39.5 kilometres total distance, 6.31 minutes, which is 6 minutes 20.5 seconds or something. 1540, 14.12 volts, minus 0.02 of an amp from the dashboard, plus 0.1 of an amp from the panel. And that's in solid tree shadow. 2 minutes later, and I put the electric windows up, sucks it down to 12.95 volts. I'm just trying to get an angle where I can read the bloody thing. Plus 0.06 of an amp, minus 0.02. 1545, we've got 13.2 volts. 1600, we've got 14.14 volts and it's still charging. 16.07, 14.43 volts, plus 0.16 of an amp. Right? 25 past 5 in the afternoon, 12.98 volts. There's only 0.015 of an amp going in, and the dashboard is sucking 0.05. Right? So by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the car's static drain is finally able to suck 3 times more than the solar panel can deliver. Next morning, 4 degrees Celsius, day 11, 06:30 in the morning, and it was charging, 6:52, 12.56, plus 0.05 of an amp, minus 0.04 of an amp. 07:15, 12.95 volts, plus 0.08 of an amp, minus 0.04. 07:30, and it's hit the float charge. It's 13.5 volts, and it plus 0.35 of an amp. As soon as it hits 14.5 volts, it drops down to 0.05 of an amp. 07:55, windscreen's wiped to get the dew off them. 07:56, 13.35 volts plus 0.22 of an amp. 0800, fully charged. And her Tomariff really likes that level of detail. He reckons that's the level of observations and notes that he would be keeping if he was running the experiment, only he'd have a whole bunch of electronic data loggers doing it for him. He wouldn't be doing what I was doing, sitting in there in front of the fire half an hour before sunrise and getting up every 15 minutes to run over there with the bonnet up, clamp meter and a multimeter in my hand to measure the current going in and the current coming out, and then keep it in my head and run back over here and write it down. I reckon it's a pretty good effort. I reckon if anybody says they doubt my figures, then they've got to go and do it and prove I'm wrong. Don't just say to me, oh, well, you know, you're a hillbilly, you couldn't be capable of doing anything scientific. It took me over 6 months to convince her Tomariff that I actually had the figures. I'd done the observations and I've got the numbers and it's not bullshit. And yeah, we seem to have worked out what's going on. When you start the engine, the battery voltage drops to maybe as low as 10.5 volts, right? Because my 95 amp hour battery is rated at 447 cold cranking amps, right? Now, when a solar regulator sees the battery voltage drop below 12 volts, the solar regulator decides the battery has been deeply discharged and it needs to be taken up to around 15 volts or so. Maybe only 14.8. 14.8 is the most I've ever seen my solar regulator run the battery up to. I think 14.83. And that's just a bit above what the car's alternator wants to see the battery go to. So yeah, the solar charge regulator wins the contest if the sun is in the sky. And I've got a 95 amp hour battery instead of a 45 amp hour battery, so my battery can throw 9.5 amp hours at the headlights when I'm driving home at night before the alternator has to do anything there. So, SunFoils in the moonlight. Absolutely. Why not? It works for me. All you have to do is give it a go. Ciao.